Hi everyone, I'm going to be sharing with you the differences between true twin flame as opposed to a false or counterfeit twin flame, as well as what is a soulmate. So, I'm going to be sharing in-depth truth regarding this topic, not just, relaying or reiterating the same facts that you can simply find online or by listening to other people talk about this subject. I do take matters of the heart very seriously, and I have had plenty of experience personally with this topic, as well as witnessing and observing others go through this. And so I feel I'm really meant to share this with you so that to help you become more aware. So, first of all, the term twin flame was invented by the New Age movement. And so, really, the whole concept of twin flames is somewhat of a joke in a sense. Many so-called twin flames or twin flame experiences is actually has to do with the counterfeit or the false twin flame. But there is some truth in it. And that truth has to do with if we were to envision souls and there would be a masculine soul, and then there would also be the counterpart feminine soul. And you can kind of envision it like the masculine would be like the scientist, and the feminine soul would be more like the artist. When they come together, they co-create and they make universes that usually are just of goodness and they don't have any mistakes. That is how you can envision souls. They are the closest in compatibility and in essence. And so their higher mission, the way that they go about their higher mission is going to be very similar, okay? Because each individual soul is unique. Although all souls' higher mission ultimately ends up being towards the same somewhat of a purpose. You do have to be careful with the idea of a higher mission as well. Very powerful when souls come together. Anyone from your soul group is a soulmate. So that is what a soulmate is. When everything had came into existence within what we know of as the universe, we had root races. And so those root races can be the idea of soul groups. And within reincarnations, most likely you have had past lives with people of your same soul group, okay? It's very common. And one way to recognize if someone is of your same soul group is that typically they will bring some form of significance into your life, whether that be spiritual awareness or, just anything very profound. That usually is a sign that that individual is a part of your soul group. It doesn't, many times we have family members who are of our same soul group, but not all the time. Sometimes we do have family members who aren't necessarily part of our soul group. It's very powerful, as I mentioned, when souls come together because it literally shifts the matrix and it changes things, okay? So a lot of the occurrences that we're seeing happening now in the world is due because souls have recognized one another and they have come together. Kindred spirits are those individuals who have had, let's say they're a similar, they are harboring a similar spirit to one another. And what this is that they will actually, in ancient times, in various cultures, they would match children based upon their star chart, which is their astrology chart, to one another, and they would be like lifelong friends. So that's an idea of a kindred spirit. They would also do this with a pre arranged marriages. And this is the darker side of that because although they match them to be compatible at times, they also would do arranged marriages to align certain countries or royal families with one another. But the darker side of this was that it wasn't a soul and they weren't truly related. And so the planets have always been very influential when it comes to the people as well that enter in and out of our life. And this has to do with certain transits that we have happening within our astrology chart. This also has to do with your moon and your Venus placement because the moon, and as I've mentioned this in another video that I have done, to me represents the subconscious mind. It can also be like somewhat of our emotions or um, how we mentally process, the way we mentally filter through and then kind of view mentally into the world. And so, Venus, if you research, the planet Venus has to do with beauty, has to do with harmony, relationships, also your fourth house, because this can represent your home life, it can represent the mother influence. You have the fifth house, you also have the seventh house, and a little bit of the 10th house can also influence the kinds of people that um, you that sort enter in and out of your life. And your Venus and Moon placement can influence the type of individual, their characteristics you may be attracted to. And so you think it's natural, but when really it's influenced by the astrology chart. Your seventh house, which is ruled by the planet Venus, um, you would also want to look at which planets are situated there because whichever planet is in your, if you do have a planet in your Libra house, that can also influence the kind of individual, or they would maybe display those characteristics that would be attracted to you. Um, And so you can see how all of this, it's very orchestrated, when you have the transits, that influences people coming out in and out of your life, people that you meet. And this can include intimate relationships. And you have to realize it's kind of like a chess game. And so if someone does not have a true eternal soul, they can kind of be positioned, within your life to just kind of pop up out of nowhere and they could be mirroring you, and this again, like I mentioned, has to do with the influence of the moon. It has to do with certain programming, our interests, and I'll get into that in a moment. And so, this place that knows your mind, right? As within, so without, as above, so below. And so, a lot of what we see, it's a mirroring. And so that's why you really have to have true strength of discernment and being able to see the essence with your heart. And I will get into this later too, how you go about doing that, in order to really see beyond the facade, beyond all these influences to the true soul. Negative ways that have been using that planet here is within your astrology chart, but also with love spells, things that have to do with the fourth dimension, okay, and the astral. So the astral realm is basically how the spirit, okay, and different kinds of forms of spirits can travel through various realms, all right? And it's also like the dream world, okay? Um, and so it's very much connected and intertwined with the fourth dimension. And the lower fourth dimension is very linked with technology, and our world that we live in, today's world, is very much, our minds are very influenced easily by technology, and it's very much a part of the matrix construct. So you can see how all of this is very interconnected, and it's not out there, it's here. And the dreams, a lot of times we fall in love, we're under these love spells because we start off dreaming, and being in a fantasy. Especially if you're someone like me who is a hopeless romantic, this can get you in trouble because, it can be, it's easier to be under these love spells, when your heart is a natural, just kind of romantic. I don't know how to explain, but your mind really gets carried away, and then when we're in that dream, there is an excellent quote. I was actually going to use it for another one of my videos, but I think I'll mention it here too. In a film, and it said it was supposed to be the character Satan, or the devil or something. And what he said was that I work through dreams. Okay. So this is really interesting when you think about this in relation to relationships. When you think of this in relation to the astral and the fourth dimension, and some of the spiritual things that are unseen. A lot of this, it's about distraction. It's about energy. Okay, your soul energy. And so, what better way to do that than by deceiving your heart, and the way that they get to your heart is through your mind and through a lot of times through dreams. And so our ideals of a relationship, what we think that is supposed to look like, it's very faulty, and it's superficial. It has to do more with the worldly things in the third dimension. It's not truly sacred, and this is the difference. Okay, now Venus too has been being used in a negative way when you think of Cupid. Now Cupid in mythology, if you're not aware, he flies around in the fourth dimension and within the astral, and he shoots his arrows, and the instant he shoots his arrow, that is the moment that you have that chemical reaction happen within your body, your mind, and you feel a spark of passion or desire, within you. And so you think you're physically attracted to the other individual, and then you fall under this blind love spell, when in actuality it was just the chemicals within your body that had done this, and what was going on behind the scenes. And so if you're serious, Cupid was the offspring of the planet Venus and Aphrodite within mythology. Now, if you're really serious about knowing the deceptions and how these false relationships are orchestrated, I highly recommend checking out what is called Love Bites. Um, it is by Tom Montalk, and he has excellent information regarding this topic. But if you're someone who is serious about it, then I highly recommend checking that out. I've experienced some of the things that they mention in that, and many other people have too. And you need to protect your heart. It's very important, especially if you're a true soul, because when you go through these things, it can be very painful. And whether you're asleep or you're just becoming aware or you already have been aware spiritually, it can be very painful for you. And I don't want anyone watching this to suffer the way I have and have to learn the hard way. Um, a lot of times we're young, when we get involved in intimate relationships. And like, I know, for me, I was really naive when I was young. And um, like I mentioned, I've always kind of had that personality of being like a romantic. And um, but due to these love spells, I experienced and felt a lot of heartache, and I've experienced loss, death. I've experienced, um, abusive relationships, just everything, and um, it's very painful, going through these things, and so it can take a while for people to go through these things too, to heal from them. But sometimes, it gets to the point where, maybe everyone's circumstance is different. Maybe you're someone, you have a child with someone, and then what happens is that then they end up getting a divorce because they realize that person really, they weren't meant for each other, because they didn't know thyself, before they jumped into the relationship. And then down the line, they already have children or whatnot. Maybe they're married, they have to get a divorce, and the children suffer, and it's just this continuous vicious cycle. And so, we don't want that. We don't want all the pain and suffering anymore. So make sure, really, I mean, I don't want to tell anyone what to do, but please, don't focus. What I would suggest is that not to focus on relationships. I mean, if you're watching this, obviously you're someone who's kind of thinking about these kind of things, or you're curious perhaps, but don't focus so much on relationships because they aren't as they seem like here. And most people won't tell you that if they're not being honest. And many times when we focus on something and we feel as if we want something, that can just create this sense of lack within us. Because ultimately, you are whole and complete within your soul. You don't need anything externally outside of yourself. Many times, that is a deception, it is a lie to get you to have etheric attachment and to be distracted as well. These are some of the signs that someone is not your twin flame. So the first sign is that they will not protect you, or they will give you a false sense of security. Someone who is your true soulmate, especially the masculine, is going to be very protective of you. And it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily be intrusive or invading or possessive of you, because possessive is a possession. And if one is trying to possess something, which you are a thing, then they're not free. And, if two individuals are not free within themselves, how can they help each other to be free? The second sign that someone is not your twin flame or soulmate is that they cannot be vulnerable with you. Now, there is a difference as well too, when someone seems as if they're being vulnerable, but really they're just ulterior motives. Like maybe they might share something that is personal or private with you that they wouldn't really typically share with anyone else. But the reason behind them doing this is actually to just throw out a hook and see if they can attach to you. These are called etheric energetic attachments. It also sometimes has the motivation or intention of getting you to open up. So then you can share personal, private things about your own true self that you wouldn't share with anyone, and then later on they can use it against you as leverage. So these are just things to be aware of. Also, there's of course sympathy energy. So sometimes people will share things, and by the way, I want to say too that it doesn't necessarily mean that what they are saying is true or factual. I would definitely, if you are serious about someone and they make certain claims that um, are personal, and they they are somewhat of a reason too why you feel you have a connection with them, because you felt like somewhat sympathetic or understanding or anything for them, then I definitely would get more factual evidence of the things that they claim. Because there are individuals who will literally, blatantly lie about things, and you don't know if they're just making it up, to maybe seem a certain way, or to, like I said, get those etheric energetic attachments from you through sympathy. You never know. The next way to tell if someone isn't your twin flame or soulmate is if they are constantly bringing things up from the past and they can't get beyond certain vicious cycles, okay, and programming. Only true souls can develop various levels past even the um, fifth dimension. And so this is why spirituality is deceptive as well too, because spirituality, a lot of what we know of here as spirituality has to do with the fourth dimension. And so people can get into spirituality, but that usually is all that they can go, and they can't truly make those deeper connections of truth. And so, even going into the etheric, a lot of individuals confuse and they think that the fifth dimension is the etheric. Now, there's some truth to this, but there's also untruth. Okay, we're always in the etheric. There is a grounded truth, and the other way to tell too with the patterns is that they want to keep reminding you too of old data, um, and sometimes they'll do this by triggering you. And this is why healing as well is so important before you jump into a relationship, because if you do not heal fully, um, you know, sometimes it's like this constant projection and then mirroring and projection and mirroring, and it's this back and forth thing. The one who has all these attachments, maybe, or maybe they have certain negative things about their shadow self or side that they haven't worked out yet, and healed from, or trauma, then they'll just project on the other individual. And if the other individual, let's say maybe they're soulless or an organic portal, um, then they'll just kind of mirror, certain things back. You don't want, sometimes there can be organic portals too, because people, and they're used by other spirits. And so the spirits will kind of use them to try to trigger you and get those attachments. And then you have entities that are hiding behind the physicality, the physical form, because it is like a matrix hologram, and they'll try to get attachments as well too. Sacred union isn't about a physical ring or a paper or anything legal. It's not of the material world. Now, real soul, true soul humans, I want to mention too, a sign that you can tell a difference is that when they have gone through something very serious, then they can not just heal from it, they can also gather the deeper truths and insights from those experiences. And a sign that someone isn't your twin flame is that if they don't learn from this. So if someone, let's say they've been married before, possibly even multiple times, and, they go and then they, for one thing, being married, I would say more than once as well, is very questionable in my mind. I feel that I've only seen other entities or organic portals have that, but of course you have your astrology chart that can influence this, but it is more. I've never personally known any soul humans that have had that because you have to realize they need the attachments. And they're the ones that always have the ulterior motives. It isn't soul humans. And so they rely on that. And so they will be willing, for example, to just jump into any engagement, right? Or relationship or marriage. It's not going to really mean much to them. And therefore, it can't be truly sacred. And so, this is something to watch out for. And this is definitely a red flag. Um, a soul human, they're really going to, even if they're the most passionate soul in this whole universe, they're not going to just ever jump into a serious commitment. Um, they're going to take marriage and a union, soul union, very sacred. And if you do take it sacred, you wouldn't. It's common sense. It's obvious. And I would definitely question if someone did. So, um, and I would never claim to. I don't know if there's young, people who will be watching this. And if you are, I definitely will not be someone who will claim and that I have a spiritual message or insight saying that you should just jump into a relationship quickly right off the bat. You definitely should not, because it would be irresponsible of me to do that, and it would be very careless and very almost inexperienced or unwise, foolish to do something like that. Somewhat ignorant, I mean, because I know, I've been through it, and I wouldn't want anyone else suffering or going through what I had. And so I definitely would advise someone not to do that. And, um, take time to really get to know yourself first. That's what I would say. And um, another sign that someone isn't your true twin flame is if they do not value you. The other sign someone is not your twin flame has to do with not being direct and honest. This kind of goes with the vulnerability. If someone is a soul mate, they will always be honest with you, no matter what. We'll use the common misconception that twin flames are usually have an age gap. So that's a common misconception that you do hear. Um, a large age gap. They will use that. There are older men in this world, and I've witnessed it. I mean, they could be, in their 50s, for example, or, just, and they will use that as justification to prey and target on younger women. It's impossible to have a true twin flame um, with someone if it's too much. It's not about age, but it has more to do. It's never about age. It's not about that. It has more to do with, of course, one's heart. I think more than anything in their soul, but it has to do also with awareness. Okay. And you can only have awareness at a similar level, right? If one has been on their journey, let's say, someone has been on their journey for 15, 20 years, whereas another individual maybe has only been on their journey for a very short amount of time, it wouldn't make sense, just it's common sense, because awareness, the level of awareness has to do with personal life experience as well too. And learning from those experiences as well as it's your soul journey. It's a process. It can't just happen overnight necessarily. The other sign that someone is not your true twin flame or soulmate if if they like attention, okay? So this is something that is easy to see, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have a personality that's very outgoing or flamboyant, because there are individuals who, because depending on your astrology chart placements, they can come off as being very reserved or introverted, even innocent, you know. This is a matrix, you know, and until you realize that, then you're not really going to be aware, you know, of how holograms are used as pawns here, you know. And they're very good at mirroring as well too, and this is something I'll get into in a moment. So if someone likes attention, and you have to really be able to read people very well, and you have to really be able to tune into their like energy and kind of their intention, that is how you're able to tell, because only someone who does not have a true eternal soul and is going to need the attention, because they need those etheric energetic attachments. And so they feed off of that attention. And another way to tell too is how they present themselves and kind of, you know, in public. It's just their energy about them, you know, and the way that they present themselves, you know, and it, um, you know, it's not physical, you know. I'm not talking about judging physicality. I'm talking, which, I mean, yes, it can be somewhat a little bit of a reflection, but it's more, again, it's more about the energy, you know, um, their essence, you know. I mean, only souls have a true essence, too, by the way, I want to mention, unique essence. But so what happens is that they will mirror you, okay? That's what false twin flame and soulmates do. And so how they mirror you is both through the programming, your ideals and interests, the worldly things, and also in the spiritual sense, into spiritual interests, and also acting reflective, okay? Now, true twin flame soulmates can do this slightly because they do have similar things with one another because of their essence. And women, of course, they have a higher copper content, and they're naturally known to be a little more intuitive. So you take that into consideration, but it isn't very extreme, you know. Um, all souls too will care about what is deeper and true. That's another way to tell. Usually, soulless ones or entities are superficial, you know, and they're shallow ultimately. Even if they talk and they act as if they care about things that are truly important. Again, it's the energy, and that's why you have to really have true discernment when you listen to them to truly know if they're being authentic or not. And you kind of have to see too, like things they've had in their life. Like, what are their experiences in life? I mean, have they really acted in selfless ways? I mean, this is actually a huge one too that I haven't even really thought of too much of. I mean, a little bit, but I haven't um, spoken of yet, is like being selfless, because you have to realize that soul humans, because we do have the true heart and true care, we are going to be more caring, therefore, for, you know, serious things that are happening in the world, and we're going to act accordingly, you know. We're not just going to be self-centered and all about ourselves, you know, and shallow. And so this is a big one. Another thing too is that soul humans, twin flames, they usually will have oppositions and challenges, in the sense that because their astrology charts are different, Like one person, for instance, they could have been married, right, and had children. I kind of used that as an example earlier. Another individual, they may not have had any children, things happen in life, and they just create challenges and blockages and distractions from them reuniting. And it can be anything. I mean, they could have had a whole different upbringing or culture growing up, than their other counterparts. And so you just never know. They could have been born in a different country, things happen, here. So with the mirroring, okay, uh, now one of the ways the smearing happens is that they will have, like with your programming and your interests, your common interests, okay? So let's use, for example, religion. That's a really good one. Um, let's say you're grow up, right? And you had religious indoctrination, okay? And so you were surrounded by that, by, certain belief systems. And there's a lie in the word belief. And then, you were attracted, let's say, to certain things that would connect with that, like music, band, for example. Well, music was another huge way that they had been keeping people under love spells. Music is so powerful, and everything here is frequency and energy, and words are spells. They're very strong. And so when you're listening to music, you're going to naturally, or seemingly naturally, it's really not natural, it's artificial, they're going to be attracted, let's say, to someone. Someone comes along and they're mirroring their belief systems, they're mirroring their indoctrination, their programming, their common worldly interests that are superficial ultimately because they have to do with worldly things. We never had the same interests in past lives that we do in this current life. So, you have to question, you know, are they really your interests? I mean, and everyone likes music and things like that. So, sometimes we can read into things and this due to these superficial common interests and what you think you're interested in, because that you aren't in your awareness, your soul awareness yet, or your higher mission. So that's just an example. And many times too, you will see organic portals with entities. And the reason is that many times entities, especially if they're harboring a malevolent or more vicious spirit, and they're very good at deceiving as well too, they will want to dominate. They're very domineering and control the other individual if they're an organic portal. And they're very territorial because they're more primal. And so it's just very miserable. And it's just, they're not compatible. And this is just something to be aware of. I always know when I see an entity with an organic portal. And this is one of the ways I'm able to tell and discern deceptive situations as well too, where I started to remember a few of my past lives. And in one of my past lives, there were actually photos of the individual that I had an intimate relationship with. And I'm not even making this up. The individual I had an encounter with someone, and they ended up looking identical almost to this photo. And so that's what I had experienced as well too. And, sometimes when you think you're resonating with someone, the truth is that it could just be maybe some kind of programming that they have, and maybe they have more of a positive or malevolent spirit that they're harboring, and so this could actually be the reason behind why you think you're attracted, or you feel as if your soul recognizes them, and resonates and feels familiar to them. And or, it could be that maybe they were soulmate in a past life. But I think The important lesson here is that if you are someone who has gone through this, um, is to be able to let go and accept that, maybe in this life, the only reason that you had that encounter was so that you could be maybe just a stepping stone in their own enlightenment journey and surgery and awakening. And I think that that truly shows, that you love or you care for someone because you're in your pride and your primal, then you only get superficial. No, I mean, you're only going to get what you're focusing on reflected back to you. And it will only be something that is superficial if that's what you were focused on. Pick your poison, flesh or fantasy, Um, either way, you're in for it. And Adam and Eve were the first souls, and you have to realize that, when you trace everything back to the root and the origin, it was more of a negative occurrence. And the truth is that when you realize we have been descending and digressing, matters of the heart, it's a lot more serious than we realize. Because Earth is an anagram for hearts. And, what better way to get to soul humans than through the heart, through your pure soul energy, um, than love and love as well. So the dark forces here, or I should say, the forces here, they're very manipulative and they're very deceptive and they can shapeshift. I'll do all these things. And you realize it's like a holographic matrix. And so they do this and they hide, like they cipher the essence, the energy, and then they hide behind it. And they're able to do these different things because of it. And so when they do this, they don't only come and approach you in a negative way. That would be too obvious. They're going to approach you as like, kind of like the idea of an angel of light. So that positive side, which is still a part of dualism ultimately as well too, you really have to watch out for it, because it could just be that, behind that facade, it isn't all rainbows and butterflies. And not that anyone is perfect or anything like that, but the truth is that positivity doesn't necessarily mean goodness. And I think that is what we really have to remember. What is equally yoked? Equally yoked has to do with if we were to envision an egg, let's use that as an example, and you have the eggshell, which is represented as physicality, the physical form, flesh, carbon, and then you have beyond that the egg white, and the egg white can be reflective of the spirit or what spirit is harboring. And also when individuals get into spirituality and spiritual things. Then beyond that, you have an egg yolk. And the egg yolk is like your soul. And so when it was said that individuals are unequally yoked, this is what it was talking about. It was talking about um, the idea even of your heart, how heavy is your heart, it's more about the internal condition, and that is really what we have to be weighing, and discerning with. And even with spirituality, there's sometimes a false cloak of divinity, which I'll get into later. And with the spirit, sometimes it's a malevolent spirit. And it stems with this bad seed, idea. And so just because someone is a spirit does not necessarily mean they're a soul, and they are equally yoked. And so when you're not equally yoked, like I mentioned with another, that can mean how you think spiritually. One may have a soul, or be spiritually developed somewhat in awareness, I should say, and then the other could have be or have harboring a different spiritual entity. And so, this is really what it comes down to. And it's not about being better or less than anyone else. It's not about hierarchy or judgment, which judgment is different from discernment. It is about truth. It is about awareness and discernment. And there's a reason why, a deeper meaning behind why these things were said to begin with. So the only way to truly experience, you cannot be in your ego, whether that be higher or lower, positive ego, negative ego, even. You cannot be in your ego and see the true essence with your heart, because you're going to have pride if you are in your ego, and you will have ignorance. So the only way to experience pure unconditional love and love for others is by being whole and complete within yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.